gin joints in all the towns in all the world. She walks into mine.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal.
I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque.
And welcome back to another episode of Realities in Publishing Comics with me, Paul Gomez. I'm glad y'all could come back today. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and drop them down there. I'll see if I can get to them. But today I wanted to cover a few topics. Mainly, the first one I wanted to cover was breaking even. I've heard a lot of talk lately about how to break even in comics. Definitely, whenever you're going into making a comic, you're going to have a certain amount that you're putting into it, and you're trying to actually break even or make a little bit more than that. And how do you do that? Brian, how's it going today? Yeah, so obviously, I tell people that you definitely have to have a plan of action, a kind of a business plan, if you will, a model that you can kind of follow, a few goals that you can kind of hit to kind of make that break even point. Of course, the first step that most people think of is crowdfunding. Whether you're going to go with Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Crowdfunder, or Zoop, any of these crowdfunding are platforms are going to help you reach that goal. But there are a lot of times where you don't meet that expectation of actually breaking even, especially if you're new. New to the scene, it's kind of hard to meet those goals. If you're putting a minimum amount, usually it's about 3 to 4,000 starting out. It can go anywhere up from there, but to find that break even point is really a hard line to go by, because you're definitely not just putting money into the art, into everything that goes into the comic, but also the printing and shipping and other things as well. Whether you're going into conventions or LCSs, there's also other things to consider, like merchandise and whatnot, your backgrounds or all the stuff that you're going to take with you. So you need to make sure that you're adding all that up. It's good to put a goal on your crowdfundings, but if you're going too high, you might not hit that goal. And one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten was make sure that you put a reachable amount for a goal on those crowdfunders, especially if you're a new creator or a first time creator, or like I was about a year ago. It's kind of hard to ask for a lot, especially if you don't know what you're doing in the scene. One of the things you add to crowdfunders is original art, uh, original pages and stuff like that, whether it's t-shirts, hats, as long as you're covering that cost. And you got to make sure that you're adding it all in there. And if you're a new creator, you really have to be reasonable and believe that you're not going to exactly cover all that cost from that crowdfund. Sure, you are going to attempt to, but I mean, sometimes you get a little bit lower of a goal so you can make sure that you reach that goal, even though it doesn't cover all the costs that you come into. Yes, I think merely breaking even is acceptable for conventions, but for campaigns, you need to make a profit to fund the next book. This I agree with to a point. Whenever you're new to the business, you've got to kind of expect to take a loss. With any good business that starts up, you have that reasonable, acceptable loss in the first few months, because people are getting to know you. They might not trust you as well, and they might not accept you. So these are some of the things that you have to understand. Definitely do your due diligence, and I can't stress this enough. Go out there and do homework on other campaigns, see what they're doing right, and see how it's going to help you on your campaign. You definitely want to try to reach that goal that covers your campaign, your comic, and hopefully into the next. But as a new creator about a year ago, I didn't have that expectation that I was going to be able to cover that entire book. So what I did was I dropped that level down, and I had a business plan that went into conventions and went into LCSs and went into other things. Now, one of my business plans is to go into Whatnot, but I haven't exactly reached it just yet. I'm actually going to be going into a few Whatnot stores in about a month. But yes, like, I mean, if you can break even the campaign, that's great, and that's the ideal thing. But like I said, you have to, especially if you're a new creator, you have to kind of understand you're getting your feet wet, and it might not exactly reach that goal. So kind of have other ideas in mind. If you are making a comic that is able to go into comic shops, talk to the LCSs around you. One of the things I did, and I've told a few creators this, is I made ash cans. I made ash cans that I could take to the LCSs before my books came out so they could know what I was bringing in after it was done. They had a lot of questions like when the next book was or how much the cost was going to be. And whenever I talk to LCSs, I try to work with them. There are a few LCSs that ask you to work on consignment. So if you put your book out there, you don't get paid until they do. And again, that's your choice to decide to go with that. I chose to go with that with a few LCSs, but that was just about one or two. The majority of them, I offered them a lower cost than I do at most. So it was they were making money and I was making money at depending on how many I was leaving there for them to sell. Then I would come back and try to sell more. But that would, to me, again, I wasn't exactly trying to make money through LCSs. To me, that was more of a advertisement and getting used to the people type of thing. The better part of making money with LCSs is whenever they ask you to come in and as a signing. If you're going to be able to have a table at an LCS and have a sign, you're going to have your full catalog of books there. And hopefully what you do is with your LCSs is you sell them the cover A, and I offer my cover A's on my table for a little bit cheaper than most. Usually for my 22-page books, I do list my cover A as $5. Again, if I sell them to the LCSs, they're a little bit more. Yeah, and some LCSs don't do comic book sales. I understand that. It's one of those things that I really had to talk to some of them and figure it out. I always tell they can learn a lot from business veterans. Definitely. There's a lot of things that I learned by looking at other campaigns and talking to people. Before I launched my first campaign, I actually had other people look at my campaign and pinpoint some of the lower factors. Originally, me personally, I was a collector of comics way back when they didn't have variant covers. So even throughout my buying of comics, I guess you could say, I really didn't get into those variants until my kids actually started buying comics. And then they started wanting these variants and whatnot. So I started learning about them. But whenever I started to decide to make a comic that I was going to sell, I started doing research on variant covers. And this is definitely one of the biggest things that I tell people. Make sure to offer variant covers. If you can offer them, you can offer different stages of value. If you have other artists that bring a little bit more value to that cover, you can offer it for a few dollars extra. So you have that A cover that you're selling at a reasonable rate. Then you have variant covers that you're selling at a little bit higher of a cost. I've always been told that Kickstarter was to help people get to that point where they could sell it and they could cover the cost. So I always did want to have one affordable rate and then some that were a little bit more so it could help me cover that cost. But again, as a new creator back then, my campaigns didn't exactly reach that goal of how much it would cover my entire cost. So I did have that battle plan, that business mentality that I was going to go into conventions and I was going to go into LCSs. Now, I had a lot of people tell me that LCSs probably was the wrong way to go, but I actually feel like it was a successful turnout for me. I've had approximately 10 to 20 table signings at LCSs, and they've ranged from good to not so good, but the majority of them I came out as a profit. There's been one or two LCS signings that I actually made more at one LCS signing than I did at some of my conventions. And that of course is factoring the table costs of the conventions, the travel and whatnot. One of the things about conventions is you definitely have to understand all the costs that's going in and figure out a reasonable cost of how much you're going to sell to break even for that convention, and then to turn a profit afterwards. I always tell people whenever they're asking about how many books to take to the convention, usually I ask them, how much is your table cost? How much is the entire cost of the convention? Because you want to take that many books that's going to cover that cost and then some. You're hoping to make a profit. And if you're not going to make a profit, then the only reason to go is to make connections. And I don't believe, to me, it was always about selling, getting used to growing my fan base and getting in contact with the customers, seeing what sold, what didn't, what they liked, and what was better for my next campaign. But I mean, of course, you want to be profitable so it can go into that next one. So, like I said, whenever it comes to breaking even, you have to figure out that accountability for that first issue and then try to reach that goal. One of the strategies that I took is decided to make a line of books instead of just one book. Now, this is a topic that I've talked to with a lot of people, whether you have that one title that you're focused on or you have many titles. And I've had a one person or another bring up the discussion of maybe I was bringing up so many titles to see what's kind of stuck to the wall, if you will. But my real reason was to yeah, I love double page spreads. Anyway, the real reason I decided to make a library of books instead of just one was because I wanted to offer and show people my range of writing. I so happened got lucky on my first book because that was the most popular one and sold a good amount that it actually helped pay for my second and third one. So if you have a title that's a little bit more popular than the others, it might help sell for the next ones as well. I'm not saying that's the way to go, but I'm saying sometimes if you're focused on one title, it's a little bit harder to meet that expectations. Having said that, if you are on one title, and this is just from my observation, merchandising is definitely a good way to go. If you have one title and you have a main hero and a main villain, these are things that you need to bring to the forefront and kind of put them on prints, put them on posters, put them on stickers so that people can get used to them and like them and not only want to buy the book, but want to buy your merchandise as well. Because like I said, that goal is to definitely break even and then make it a little bit more so you can make those next books. I hear a lot of people say that it's not about the money, that it's about the joy of making comics. And I definitely agree. Making comics is fun. I love getting in new pages from my artist. I love writing. I love getting the teams together, talking and putting stuff. And before I even started this, I told people, if I was going to make a comic, I'm going to make a comic for comic fans because I am a fan. So there's definitely that love behind it, but you also got to kind of understand too. There's that money aspect. It does cost a good amount, so you have to keep that in mind. Me personally, I don't exactly come from wealth, and I don't exactly have a job enough to sink as much money as I can into this. So that was always on my mind whenever I was making comics, and whenever I decided to make these. Now, granted, the way I came into making comics is probably a little bit different than most, where I was making comics because I wanted to raise the morale of my house, and we decided to build some stories and make it into a comic to put it on the shelf to kind of see where we, how far we could go with it. But there's always those goals that you should have. It started out with a goal of me and my family getting together to write a book. And then it turned out into a goal for us to make it a comic, even though it was going to be a household project. And as a reward, after talking to an amazing artist, we decided to make a comic worthy enough to put on an LCS bookshelf. And that's where we started this comic journey. So no matter where you start, you have to understand how much it's going to cost, how much it's going to cost to break even, and how much the future is going to cost. If you're making multiple titles, that's definitely something that you need to kind of understand in it as well. I tell people always do your homework whenever it comes to this. Now, I didn't just jump in and make a comic right away. Like I said, me and my kids we started by brainstorming ideas and throwing them around. But one of the first things I did was get an editor and kind of float ideas between me and him, and he knew what he was doing, so he could kind of guide me a little bit along. I advise always to go out there and ask. Like I said, if you ever need anybody to drop a question on, I'm here. Anybody in the madness is here. There's great creators out there that it will be glad to help you. So don't be shy and ask. Don't be shy and don't ask, because if you ask, it's going to help you along and not so you won't have those problems that I have and a lot of other creators had starting out. But breaking even is definitely a big point, and it's a big topic. It's one of those things. If you can't break even and can't get on to the next one, how are you going to afford those next comics? And how is this going to continue on? A lot of people think that if you get a publisher, your publisher is just going to be able to take that book, put it in comics, and you're going to make tons of money. And I don't know how it is for a lot of the publishers, but I know with the publishers I dealt with, it's kind of a hand-in-hand thing. They are helping you, but you got to understand, you need to help yourself as well, and you got to help your publisher get out there also. A lot of publishers out there are starting out or trying to break even or trying to make that next comic as well. So if you're out there pushing your comic, if you're in LCSs and being a spokesman, not only for you, but for your publisher, this is going to help sell your book and help sell their book and kind of raise you to another level. Yes, publishers are definitely there to help you out and help you to get to that next level. But you got to understand, it's not a one-way street. It's a give and take thing. Just because a publisher does put you in previews, does get you in LCSs, doesn't mean that LCS is going to buy a ton of books just because that publisher symbol on it. Sometimes they'll buy 5 or 10 because of that publisher. But if you have a relationship with them, if they see that you're published with someone and that you have a relationship with them, that you could possibly go to that LCS and do signings for their customers or make an appearance, they're definitely more willing to talk about things, maybe even talk about exclusives, talk about bringing you and your artist in. And this is a great thing for everybody, not just for you, not just for your publisher, but for the LCSs as well. If you're there making money, you should be there trying to make them money as well, because they're helping you out. And I can't stress that enough. Like I said, just because you have a publisher doesn't mean that they're going to do all the work for you. Make sure it's a hand-in-hand thing. Make sure you're doing everything that you can to push your books as well. Now, and like I said, I've always had a business plan and always had my goals kind of go along with things. It was crowdfunder first, convention second, LCSs, and like I say, whatnot was really my third thing. Publishers were an if I can get into it kind of thing. I definitely submitted, but it was one of those things that you ain't going to get into a publisher overnight. I mean, even if a publisher did sign you, it usually is going to take a few months for anything to really happen. And that's one thing that should be known whenever you start this journey. Some things do take a little bit longer than others. Conventions are a good example. Whenever you sign up for a convention, it usually takes a month or two for that convention to come in. And if you don't sign up until a certain point, they're all sold out. So make sure you understand and know what you're taking and what you're going to do into those conventions, especially those first few. After that, you kind of get your feet wet and kind of understand. Just about every convention I've been to has been a little bit different than the other. There's been some conventions that I went to the first year that were different than the second year. So it's one of those things that once you get a few conventions under your belt, you kind of have a little bit understanding of what it is. But even still, the crowds are going to be different. Whether it's the same convention from one year to another, you might still have that different crowd. So you definitely have to understand that going into it. Like I said, breaking even's been on a conversation in a lot of people's mind, and they've talked about LCSs, and I've talked about how I've gotten into a few LCSs, making connections with LCSs, talking to the people, not just the owners, but the people that work there and the customers that go there is a great way to make a bond with them, even if they're not in your community. There's been times where I'd go to a convention and see LCSs that were there at that convention, and I talk to them and see what they have, see if they sold independents, and I drop off one of my issues at the middle of the convention and go talk to them at the end of the convention. Now, not all comics are for every comic book store. That's definitely one of those things that you have to understand. Bouncing those ideas off the store owners and store workers is definitely a good thing and getting their feedback. One of the things, like I said, whenever I first started, it was me and my kids, and we were doing it as a home project. And then at a point, we decided we wanted to try to get it on an LCS shelf. That was to show my kids that we actually did something that was worthy of being on an LCS. So that was actually a goal from the beginning. And it wasn't that I was trying to get into every LCS that I could. It was that I wanted to show them that their work, my work, that our combined effort could put something of value on a shelf. So whenever I originally started making those, I wanted to make sure that I made them within the range of the LCS acceptability. Not showing too much, not showing nudity and not showing too much violence. Now, we did have a little bit adult content because my books were a little bit more aimed towards kids or teenagers, older teenagers, and younger adults. But again, that's one of those things that you take in consideration whenever you're in the idea process. If you are wanting to LCSs, you need to make sure that your product is acceptable for them and that you're approaching them the right way. Having talked about breaking even, another thing I want to talk about is goals. Now, I know a lot of people that get into making comics and they start talking right away about their comic being a Netflix show or their comic getting into Marvel or DC or Image, and these are great goals to have. I'm definitely not trying to tell anybody not to have those goals. But what I want to say is understand that there are steps, and it's not exactly, again, it's not going to be an overnight process. The odds of making a comic and it being an overnight thing are probably the same as winning the lottery. So understand that, know that. If you know people, if you're a superstar, then maybe, but if you don't have that much money and if you're going about it the way I am or most creators are, there's definitely processes that you go into. You need to get into that comic book community, get yourself established, start making friends and connections and rapport with people. Definitely try to get into that aspect or state of mind that you're entering a new group, a new community, a new family, if you will. And to me, it really has been a family. I mean, I didn't know what to expect whenever I started my comics, but I've had so much help from amazing promoters, from people in the industry, from artists and other creators. It's one of those things that you don't take a back seat on helping other people because they're going to help you out as well. Yes, always have goals in mind, because if you don't strive for a goal, then you're probably not going to get anywhere. But make sure that you have reasonable goals as well as long-term goals. Well, one of the first goals that I had was, just making a book. And that's a hard enough one as is. Whenever I first started with my first book, it had so many roadblocks and problems that I decided to double down and make my first book that came out. And whenever I made that first book, it kind of picked up a little bit of steam. So my next goal was to see what conventions were like, see how that landscape is, and learn as much as I could about that area. I didn't start really building my rapport with the LCSs until I started getting my feet wet into landscaping. Now I did take ash cans and flyers around beforehand. I didn't exactly understand the Kickstarter, the campaigning community compared to the LCSs. And this is something that's been brought up to me a lot of times. If you're going into an LCS and you're asking to advertise a crowdfunder, you have to understand that they most of the time feel like that's taking money out of their pocket. That's their competition. So I've had a lot of LCSs. As a matter of fact, I think most of them didn't exactly want to advertise my crowdfunder. And I understood that. And it was like I had flyers and I had ash cans, and I was like, if you don't want the flyers, I understand. Would you mind taking the ash cans? Now, some of them did and some of them didn't. And again, that's one of those things that you go with. You kind of roll with the punches. Whenever you're talking to LCSs, you're kind of on their ground and you want to make sure that they feel comfortable with it as well. So whenever I did go back to those LCSs that didn't take my flyers or ash cans, I brought them the comics after they were actually complete. And, I let them see the comics and make sure that they were comfortable with it for their store. Again, I didn't get picked up in every store. There were about 2 or 3 stores around here in DFW that still haven't picked up any of my books. And to me, that's okay. That's their choice. It's their store. It's just like me asking to advertise on another campaign. I don't expect anybody to advertise my books on their campaign because it's their campaign and it's their choice to show advertisements of anyone else as well. I love advertising other books, whether it's through my backers or talking about them. If you go look on my Facebook, I try to post at least 2 or 3 times a week of retweeting other people's stuff. And this is one of the things. Helping other people out has definitely been one of my goals as well. Yes. Right now we have a great campaign that's going on, Worthy Chaos Redemption. I definitely helped her out with her campaign and helped put together some of her tier graphics and help her bounce a few things. Yes, I'm definitely going to help Jeff out, especially on his next project, I'm sure. Our next project. Anyway, yeah, and it's one of those things, like I said, it's good to have goals. Just kind of keep some a little bit shorter term than others so you don't get burnt out. My first goal, like I said, was to get that comic. My second goal was to learn about conventions. Then after that, I started hitting the LCSs as often as I could. And it did take a while. It wasn't exactly a 1, 2, 3 week kind of event. It took months for me to get to know some of these people, to get to talk to them and enjoy hanging out in the LCSs and talking to the customers. There are several goals out there that you can meet, and finding a publisher definitely is one of them. I know a lot of creators out there that who do get their book and expect a publisher just to jump to them. One of the things you should do after you get a book is understand that these publishers, a lot of them specialize in certain books. Whether you have a horror book or whether you have a superhero book, try to find a publisher who's carrying like titles, if you will, or in the same genre, and then go to their page and send submissions. Usually, and this is the hardest thing for me, was usually on every publisher's page, they're going to have a list of submission rules and regulations or kind of what they want. I had one publisher asked for like 5 pages. One publisher asked for 6 pages, and it was one of those things that it said in their rules. If you didn't abide by their rules specifically, they weren't even going to look at your comic. So make sure that you look at the guidelines and make sure that you're trying to follow them to the T. Understand what they're. It doesn't hurt to reach out and ask if you don't understand, but try your best. Publishers don't usually just jump out at and grab whatever comic there is. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened. I'm sure that it's possibly that it's happened before. I haven't exactly heard of it, but it's one of those things. If you want to get noticed by a publisher, submit your stuff. Submit it. Have a good campaign. Get in contact with people. One of the things that I did was I would look at YouTube videos. At first, it was YouTube videos of learning how to script and write, and then after that, it was YouTube videos of people in the industry, getting into the industry, breaking into the industry, and and it was one of those things that there were a lot of tips in some of those videos. Some of the editors are editors in chief doing interviews and telling people what to do. One specific video had an editor-in-chief tell people, hey, sometimes we overlook the submissions. Go ahead and send us your book, the physical book. And that's what I did. I reached out to that editor-in-chief and said, hey, where can I send this physical book to you? I've submitted the book, and I'd like to get to that next level by actually sending you the book so you could have it in your hand. Sometimes it does take a little bit of legwork. And that's really what it is. If you're making a comic, you have to be a little bit of everything. You have to be a little bit of your own PR person, your own distributor, a little bit of everything to get out there and get that word out. There are several different types of goals. And I know I have probably a little bit different goals than most. I know some people are comfortable on crowdfunding, and that's fine. I don't think that there'll be a book of mine that probably won't hit crowdfunding. I could be wrong about that, and there could be projects that I'm working on that could definitely change my mind on that. But if you're good on crowdfunding, if it makes you the amount of money that you're comfortable with, then that's definitely a good thing. Make sure you're reaching out to people who can advertise and help you out. And like I said, make sure you're advertising people who help push your name as well. Most people in the industry that I've talked to really, like I said, want to try to get into those bigger names. Me personally, my big goal is to get into previews. And I guess the reason for that is because of talking to LCSs, especially talking to LCSs that weren't in my community. That was always the first question that came up. Are you in previews? How can I get the books? When am I going to expect the next one? So to me, my big goal was to get into previews. And to me, that's kind of a 5-year goal. If I get into it earlier than that, I am more than happy. But in the meantime, I have 100 different other goals to meet upon from here on out. One of the goals that I did have, and I don't know if it's one of those things that you should say is like, I didn't expect to get into Image or Marvel or DC. I was a big fan of Aftershock before I started making my books. Aftershock and Boom and Scout Comics and Black Mask. These were some of the comic, I guess, publishers that I saw that were a little bit more edgy. Now, I didn't really know the indie community that well. I had probably backed one or two before I had actually started making my own and jumping into the community as much as I have. Nowadays, I try to back at least one comic off crowdfunders a month. But it's more because I know what the landscape is as opposed to what I did back then. So back then, my goal was to get into Aftershock. Now I see the landscape and how shaky it is and how a little bit elusive it is to make it. It's like I still want to get into previews to get my name out there and to get my books out there, but I'm having an enjoyable time crowdfunding. I'm enjoying meeting these great people and helping people out. This is, to me, a great area to be. So, like I said, making your goals is definitely one of those things that you should take into consideration before you start, so you can kind of know where you're going and have that compass needle of north where you're going to. Other than breaking even and reaching your goals, there's really not much more that I have. It's like I said, it's harder to get into published comics. Reach out there, talk to people who are in those publishers. A lot of people will open up and talk to you. Just say hi, send them an email, get out there, get your book started. There's a lot of people that have ideas for books, and that's great. You definitely don't want to close that door, but make sure you understand that it's not the easiest of communities to get into. You do have to have a little bit of money to back your book if you're not an artist, and if you are, understand the time and what it takes to get into it. Talk to other artists that have done it. Understand and know the field that you're going to get into. Jeff knows a few things about making art, and he knows a few things about getting into talking to publishers as well. And he's been a great friend of mine. He's helped me out a great deal, and he's definitely made a few amazing covers for me that have sold really great. So like I say, make sure you know where you're at. Make sure you know where you want to go, and make sure you know where you're going, because if you don't have those goals, if you don't know how you're going to break even, then how do you expect to get there? And that's a lot of things that I believe that new creators don't ask themselves whenever they start out. I really don't have that much more for this episode, Pops. How's it going?
You say what? You say what?
I don't have that much more for this episode, Pops. How you doing?
Well, I was gonna do like I sometimes do and just chime in a little bit. What you set your goal at? I mean, you're also kind of basing it on how many people you think are gonna buy your book. Okay. Yeah. And if you go out there and you think, I'm going to sell this many books, I'm going to need this many books, and you set your goal that way, and then you don't sell that many books, you're never going to reach that goal.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, if you set it too low, nobody cares. Nobody's going to look at it. That is not true.
No.
I've seen so many campaigns that started on Indiegogo at $500, and they're in the thousands. Okay, I've seen it on Kickstarter. They started 1,000 and they go. It depends on how many eyes you get on your project.
Yes.
Okay, and having something that, look, I've told people 100 times, I can sell book one.
Yeah.
All day long, I can tell people how great book one's going to be.
Yeah, and she's already got book one.
But now hold on. It ain't until you get book one in your hands.
Yep.
And then find out whether or not it's good.
Right.
Before you can sell book two, okay? Because no matter how good I can talk, this has got to sell itself.
Yep.
Okay? So book one was good. Now she's changed artists, and it looks the next book looks even better. But that's got nothing to do with the whole thing is I won't have a hard problem reselling this book to the people that backed it the first time.
Right.
Okay. They're going to be in because it's good. Right. And that makes it easier to sell it to the people who weren't in the beginning and who do want to get like the catch up here and get caught up and see what's up.
And you got to build a good reputation. Like Brian Christgau has built up a great reputation.
A good story though. You can be the nicest guy in the world, and you can have the best artist in the world, but if the story ain't no good, or you don't have a good editor, and the story don't have a good flow, you're going to have a hard time selling book two.
Yeah.
Okay, so really, I mean, you guys that are just coming out with that first book, my God, take a year, get it ready, get it completely polished. Talk to everybody you know and ask them, what do you think? How's it look? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Then start your pre-launch campaign, and everybody that you care about's already seen it, and they're behind you, and you'll have the backing and the support you need when you go out into pre-launch.
Yeah.
You have people saying you want this guy in your show because he's got this badass project. You got to have that word of mouth. You got to have the hum. You got to have the buzz. You got to create that before you launch your book.
And the thing about it is, and I don't think a lot of people understand about it, it translates with you in your career. I mean, I don't know if I would call it a career that I'm in at the moment. Having said that, I've gone to conventions after campaigns and had people say, I seen you on a stream. I seen your campaign. I seen this book.
Yeah.
And I've heard about people buying it. And I've heard about a review that came out, or, you know, it being on another show. I've had people come up to my table and say it. So make sure you're doing a great campaign, because these things translate. And it helps you get that great convention. It helps you at LCS signing. It helps you get into LCSs.
Yes.
So, I mean, having that first book out there, making sure it's nice and polished and you have something to show people, it speaks a great deal. I mean,
and don't price yourself out of sales.
Right.
Okay. Right. This is a long game.
Yeah.
This is a long game we're playing here. I mean, if you're here for the one book, $100,000, good luck. Good luck. Okay. This is a long game. You build an audience, you build a fan base, you network, you build it bigger and more, and you keep working at that. Okay. There's no other way to say it other than that. I've been trying to get people to network together for 3 years. Okay. Building something that people know they can go there and they can find creators, they can find podcasters, they can find writers, artists, letterers, colorists, whatever you're freaking looking for. I've made a group where you can find that, right?
Yeah.
And now, granted, we are way outside of what that group started out as. This weekend, we're about to do our 34th straight month of Croncon.
Yeah, man.
34th
That's amazing
month. Okay, where we haven't missed a show. We've come out here and done it every freaking month.
Right.
Yeah, like it's a marathon, you guys. This
exactly.
is if you want people buying book 3, 4, and 5, then you better be really good on book 1 and 2, bro. You better be really good. You know what I mean? I bought book 8 of Brian's series. Okay, because I didn't know about Brian's series before this last year when I met him. So
and I'm looking forward to reading it too. I haven't got it yet, but I will.
Yeah, well, I pledged for book 8 because it had Preston's that Preston wraparound cover, and that's one of the few times I ever bought a book because of its cover. Right. But I also wanted to see what Brian's got going on because Brian was a new friend of mine. You know, well, Brian packaged up the whole series, sent it to me, and trust me, book 1 sells the rest. Okay, and that's what I'm trying to say. You got to have that first book has to be good enough to grab them by the throat, pull them inside the story, and then you don't let them go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
They get to the end of book 1 and they want book 2. You can't let them go. And you always want to make the next one better than the last one. Don't ever relax. Don't ever think I'm there. Don't always try to put something better in your fans' hands because they're going to keep talking about you.
And always challenge yourself.
Just saying where people say, I've seen you. I've seen your book. Somebody told me about it, whatever. It's still word of mouth.
Yeah,
it sells comics better than anything.
Man, I had a con that on the first day, I had this group of kids. They were high school kids. One of them came up and bought a book, and the other ones were just talking behind him. Mm-hmm. The next day, he had read that book, told his friends about it. I had 10 more sales that came from that group alone. I mean, they all came to me and told me how.
This is what's funny about that. Yeah. When we were kids, we would have just passed that book around.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were saying that
one
some
book,
of them
we
had
would have
read
passed
some
it
of it,
around. Everybody would have read it. You see what I'm saying? Because
but they loved it.
there was no
Yeah.
speculator value. There was no
Yeah.
maybe this might be worth money someday. We used to fold them up, stick them in our pocket, and trade them with our friends and stuff. It wasn't until grading became a thing that Western comics became a commodity as opposed to a form of entertainment. In which, if anybody really wants to know why manga's kicking our ass, because they have a disposable medium.
Yeah.
They still keep them in their back pocket. They still pass them around between their friends. It's easier, quick turn art. Okay, it's a lot less lines. It's a lot less work. It's quick turn art. And you know what else? The printers ain't hitting them like they hit you comic people for that paper. Do you wonder why that is? It's because of the speculator market, yo.
I believe it. I believe it.
I'm telling you.
But yeah.
That's why comic paper's worth so much more than everybody else's paper. Magazine paper, whatever. Look, they hit you guys.
Yeah.
They hit you guys for money. They don't do that to everybody.
No. I know. I know.
I mean,
but I mean, it is a marathon.
Time, if they treated you guys like they treat manga, and the printing was more on the same cost level, you guys could sell books for a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they put you in that position. They put the cost, the cost of making comic. Now, look, we all know you could print 40,000 or something, and they ain't paying near what you guys are.
No.
But half the time, they're trying to charge what you guys do.
And that's why I tell people, you got to understand the cost going in. You definitely, kind of eye that break-even point. That should definitely be a goal. I mean, whenever I came into it, I didn't expect to break even on that first Kickstarter. I was hoping, but I wasn't expecting it to. Whenever that first book started selling so well, and then I could start paying for the next few books, that was a great thing that I had reached that goal, and I had new goals to hit. It is definitely a marathon. It's not one of those things that you're gonna, like I say, it's not gonna be an overnight success.
No.
I had some good success with my first book, and I thank the heavens that I got the success that I did. But it still took a lot of, footwork. It still took a lot of getting out there and selling everything.
Look, I know you put in the work, Paul. Okay? I know you do, because for you, like you said earlier, it was like a thing for your family, for a morale thing for your family.
Yeah.
I know you were highly invested in that and very passionate about that. So for you, putting in that work was like that's kind of easy. That's just something you want to do for your family. That kind of motivation makes things easier.
It really was, and I didn't expect it to turn into what it did, because, like I said, I was originally just doing this for a home project.
Yeah.
And, whenever I figured out the amount that was going to go into that first one, I was like, this is an acceptable amount that I want to do for my kids, show them that we made it to this far. And so to me, getting that book on that comic book shelf, and then take my kids to conventions, and, Dylan being on this show, he loves it. So it's like,
dude,
I've reached that goal. Yeah.
He's so cool. And for those of you who don't know Brian over here in the chat, Six Gun Gorilla, go check it out. That's this guy's book, and you can get all 8 of them. Trade 2 trades, or and there's multiple ways you can get it. You can get it in floppies, which is how I, because of who I am. But it's a good book. Look, Carissa's book's out. Everybody's got something right around the corner because it's tax time.
Right.
Okay. I seen somebody say, oh, yeah, it was Doc this morning. He's like, man, I know so many people that are busting out. He's like, yeah, it's tax time.
Yeah. I heard about like 20 of them that are dropping this week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tax time. But look, pick and choose the stuff you love.
Yes.
And share and promote the stuff that maybe you can't get behind or can't afford. It's like, still help these guys out because they do put in work, with that, we just about done. We can play some commercials on the way out, Paul. I just wanted to make sure you understood when we did our campaign, we not only priced some fans out of buying it, which was an accident, a misunderstanding between me and the campaign manager, but we also had the goal set too high because we thought we were going to sell a whole lot more books than we did. Of course, if it had been priced right, we might have. Right.
And that's one of the things.
The stuff you learn from the mistakes you make.
Exactly. Do your due diligence. This is what I tell people. Go out there, look at 100 campaigns if you're going to throw your first one, so you can learn what is out there, what's selling, and what are prices and stuff. I mean, it's great to ask somebody, but I mean, there's campaigns out there that you can look at and learn from. Yeah.
Lots of them.
Yeah.
So go check some stuff out. Go join the madness over there on Facebook, and you'll see all kinds of stuff flowing through that feed every day, all day. That's where the real work gets done, Paul, say your goodbyes, and I'll play some commercials.
All right, everybody. Again, my name is Paul Gomez. You can get me at Paul Gomez 790 on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Of course, I'm here every Wednesday. Other than that, the only new thing I got is me joining ASAP Imagination, which is an amazing thing.
Is that an exclusive?
That's going to be, my A covers on all my books. For now, we're talking, there's other stuff I can do. I'm going to be on Whatnot in February, I think the second week, on about 4 or 5 channels. They're an exclusive of PTSD, that beautiful black and white cover.
Oh, the black and white one, yo. Ooh. All right, Paul. I will see you next week. Well, I'll probably see you this weekend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'll be there. I'll be popping in and out. All right, we'll talk after this.
Right. Peace, everybody. Check out some of these cool projects.
The Doctor is in, baby. This is Doc Blalock, and you're watching the Madness Comic Network.
In a world where creatures of myth and legend exist, a covert task force is charged with keeping humanity safe from supernatural threats. And when young Nancy Moon stumbles into the eternal battle between good and evil, she finds...
Oh my God, will you shut up? What's happening? Agent Beckett here. Aren't you tired of stuff like that? Want something different? Roll the tape. Whoops. Sorry about that. That's a song I'm writing for my ex. Okay, here we go. Yeah, that's more like it. Alrighty. Welcome to the world of the mythicals. We have it all. Monsters. Magic. Government agents. He's the strong silent type. This guy. Ugh, gross, dude. Get some kind of cream or something. Lots of 90s style action. Pew pew pew. And that strong female lead alluded to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention a dashing field commander with a great sense of fashion. Look at those glasses. South River Studios presents The Mythicals, Issue 1. Buy it, if you dare. Ugh, will you can it already? How'd you get free? Now beat it before I lose my cool. So what are you waiting for? Sign up today. Like right now.
Sign up today on Indiegogo.
The original intention of the film was just for my personal use, but I thought, with it being such a unique thing, that I'd like to offer it to anybody who wants to see it. Things like that. And it's just a unique film of him.
He says, I beat you. He says, they say we came in under the dead heat. He says, that's not true because I beat you. And the American said, well, he says, if you like to think so, he says, but I know the real story. He says, I know I clearly won that one.
Comic Books for Kids provides comic books to kids in hospitals and cancer centers across the U.S. It's a place where we can all work together to make sure every child has a comic book. 100% of all proceeds go towards the kids. It's about making a difference, and while they're in the hospital, allowing them to fly like a superhero, battle dragons, or rescue teddy bears. We are in every state in the country and now support over 160 hospitals. Every month, we add more.